Picture this. You are on a tropical island. Things are great. Except the island you're on is filled with monsters.
Not.
No, not that island. I'm talking about Komodo Island. Komodo, as in the Komodo dragon. Called dragons for a reason. These guys weigh as much as 2 adult men, and are equipped with a mouth full of teeth made for slicing through meat like butter. And let's not forget about their venom, which causes uncontrolled bleeding. Now, back to the island. We're looking at a guy climbing a tree in search of some delicious fruits. There aren't many details, but according to the neighbor who witnessed the tragedy, 2 big lizards came out of nowhere and started lurking below the tree, just waiting for him to make the biggest mistake of his life. And well, you have read the title of this video, right? He had gone from potential prey to an easy meal. The monsters were on top of him in no time. There wasn't much he could do as they grabbed him with their jaws and pinned him down with their heavy bodies. The reptiles ruthlessly shredded him apart from head to toe. Backup finally arrived, but it wasn't looking good. Let's just say, he probably looked like that red dude from those superhero movies. He was brought to a clinic on a nearby island, but did not make it. The poor guy was simply unlucky. You see, despite being huge, fast, and capable of hunting water buffaloes, these lizards are very unlikely to end your life. As a surprise to no one, World War I sucked. It was a stale war of attrition, where soldiers lost their lives without meaning. The only good thing about this war was probably the so-called Christmas truce, when both sides of the Eastern Front were like, can we just chill a couple days and celebrate Christmas? So they crossed no man's land, shook hands, and even exchanged gifts. Not to mention, swapping addresses in the hope of reuniting in case they survived the senseless war. On the Eastern Front, however, things were very different. Not only did these men spend Christmas eating moldy biscuits with a hint of rat and gunpowder, but both sides were about to face a new enemy. Hungry beasts were lurking behind the tree lines. Wolves, numbering in the hundreds. In the beginning, they were discovered feasting on the bodies of fallen soldiers. But it didn't take long for them to grow bold and go for the injured. In one instance, a Russian field hospital filled with wounded, unarmed men was attacked by wolves. And shortly after, the canines started emerging on the front lines, attacking both sides. German soldiers were quick to report this to Colonel General Hermann Emil Gottfried von Eichhorn. German names, am I right? Anyways, he took this very seriously, passing on the news to higher-ups for investigation. The Russian side acted faster by ordering former hunters in the army to go grab a sniper rifle and exterminate the beasts. A failure. Only a few hunters returned, bringing back word of there being even more wolves than previously thought. About this time, the German higher-ups had learned that large packs of starving wolves had left the woods of modern Lithuania in search of food, entering nearby countries. You see, the year before, wolves had begun attacking civilians and taking the lives of multiple children. Learning the reality of the danger, the German soldiers began to fight back against the canines. There were repeated attempts to poison them using cyanide-filled deer carcasses, even going as far as using their own fallen comrades as bait. When this didn't work, they resorted to using chlorine gas when wolves were spotted in the forest. This also proved unsuccessful. In desperation, both sides started using their spy planes to locate the wolves, but this was the worst idea yet. Reporting back, wolf spotted northwest of the base, over. Oh, that's right. We haven't invented the radio yet, so this is pointless. By the time a pilot had landed and shared the location, the wolves were long gone. And if you're thinking, just shoot them, duh. Well, they tried, using rifles, machine guns, hell, even grenades. And sure, they got some of them, but most soldiers were trained for long-range combat in trench warfare, not shooting fast targets in close quarters. Reality was setting in for the soldiers. This wasn't working, so both sides decided to work together and take their aim at their common enemy instead. It wasn't just a truce. The Germans and Russians even formed platoons in mutual hunting parties. And working together, the men would go on to shoot hundreds of wolves, forcing the remaining to tuck their tails between their legs and flee. They did it. Their common enemy was defeated, meaning their enemies again. So, the enemies of your enemy is your ally. Unless their enemy is your enemy too, then your first enemy and you have a common enemy, making you allies. Well, at least until... In 1945, during the next World War, the Allied forces launched Operation Matador in order to recapture several Japanese-held islands in Burma. The attacks began with naval bombardment on Ramree Island. Within short, British and Indian soldiers came ashore and engaged in combat against the unwavering Japanese. But after 2 weeks and the emergence of a literal tank, the Japanese had a change of mind.
Screw honor! Retreat!
1,000 Japanese soldiers fled towards the other side of the island in hopes of reaching a larger imperial unit for backup. Little did they know, this decision would turn out to be a huge mistake. You see, to get there, the troops had to cross hostile swamplands, filled with venomous critters and disease-spreading parasites. But despite falling ill and running out of stamina, the soldiers had no option but to keep moving through the murky waters. They were making progress, but unbeknownst to them, something had been watching them from under the surface this whole time and couldn't suppress its hunger anymore. The waters were infested with saltwater crocodiles. Enormous, aggressive reptiles that, unfortunately for the Japanese, see human as nothing more than an easy meal. It was a massacre. Out of the 1,000 Japanese soldiers who fled, only 20 were said to make it out alive. The rest were reportedly eaten by crocs. Shortly after, the tragedy was added to the Guinness World Record under most human fatalities in a crocodile attack, at roughly 900 dead. According to one Allied commander, that night was the most horrible that any member of the motor launch crews ever experienced. The scattered rifle shots in the pitch-dark swamp, punctured by the screams of wounded men crushed in the jaws of huge reptiles, and the blur. Okay, Shakespeare, relax. This guy wasn't even there. Understandably, in more recent time, many scientists have questioned the validity of this event. First of all, 500 Japanese survived, not just 20. And according to first-hand reports, most soldiers who died did so by drowning while crossing a channel. Secondly, given that fewer than 100 people lose their life to saltwater crocodiles each year, what are the odds that they would have killed 900 Japanese soldiers over a few days on some tiny island? So in 2017, Guinness World Records removed the exaggerated story from their book after learning the truth, and were all like, "Crocodile Massacre? Don't know the guy, but hey, check out this other record some rich people paid us to include this year." So the crocs definitely didn't eat 900 people, but how many did they eat then? The exact number is unknown, but local accounts estimated that at least 10 to 20 people were likely to have ended up in a giant reptile's stomach, which is still crazy. Oh, and the swamps were also filled with sharks, Which brings us to the next incident. This event is basically part 2 of the previous one, occurring the same year in the same war. Captain Charles McWay and his crew were crossing the open sea on board a heavy cruiser called USS Indianapolis. The men aboard had just delivered a secret cargo to a nearby island on the orders of President Truman himself. Turns out, it was the final components of a nuke that would later delete over 100,000 people from Nagasaki. Now, normally, a heavy cruiser like the USS Indianapolis would be escorted by warships capable of detecting enemy submarines, but they were far away from danger, and the enemy's navy was at its last leg, so no problem, right? Yes, problem. As fate would have it, a Japanese submarine had spotted the cruiser and fired 2 torpedoes into its side. The men who weren't blown into pieces or trapped in the interior did their best to prepare lifeboats as the ship quickly sank. Of the 1,200 crewmen aboard, about 300 went down from the explosion and sinking. The remaining 900 all had to share a limited number of lifeboats, leaving most men clinging or set adrift. Their only hope was rescue. Until then, they had to keep their spirits up. Oh man, I can't wait to survive this thing and return to my family. The crew were in deep trouble. In the daytime, they faced the harsh sun of the equator, resulting in severe sunburns. Not to mention severe dehydration in combination with saltwater poisoning. And at night, the water would cool them down, causing hypothermia instead. But most frightening was the danger they couldn't see, lurking below.
Shark!
Good one, man. You're real. Sharks had smelled the wounded men and were gathering in large numbers. Namely tiger sharks and oceanic whitetips. They began by picking off the dead. But it wasn't long until they started attacking the remaining sailors, tearing them apart with their serrated teeth. Survivors recalled the desperate screams as their fellow crew members were eaten alive, turning the water from blue to red. There wasn't much the men clinging to the boats could do except pray that the guy next to them smelled better to the sharks. Meanwhile, the sharks had the time of their life. An estimated 100 men were eaten alive by sharks during this tragedy, making it the deadliest shark attack in history, with no close contenders. It wasn't until 4 days later that the survivors were spotted in the open ocean by another Navy ship that just happened to pass by. The 900 men who survived the sinking were now only 316. The tragedy was a stain on the Navy, being called the greatest failure in US Navy history. It was so bad that the government had to cover it up from the public until the Japanese surrendered. Enough about war. Instead, let me tell you about something crazy that happened in East India. It was a regular day in the countryside. This old lady was just gathering some water near her village. The birds were birding. The fish fishing? But things were about to take a dark turn. An elephant had, for whatever reason, decided that her mere existence was a problem. Long story short, she was tragically turned into a human pancake. The angry elephant had apparently fled an animal sanctuary nearby, so it probably didn't have the fondest memory of humans. Fast forward to her funeral. Her body was placed in a pyre, and close ones were mourning. What a horrible way to die, but at least now she can finally rest in peace. The elephant from before had returned. People fled the scene as the elephant grabbed her body from the pyre, then threw her away. And for the second time, it started trampling her. turning her from a pancake to an even thinner crepe. Damn, that sucks. But how's that even possible? Is she the reverse elephant whisperer or something? Honestly, it's not that deep. She was simply at the wrong place at the wrong time. Twice. So, while animal attacks such as these are rare, they showcase just how ruthless nature can be under the wrong circumstances. That's it. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!